Most yarn stores will have an umbrella swift and a ball winder available to you when you go into their store to shop, so that if you buy yarn that's wound like this in a hank, you can wind it into a cake before you leave the store. Otherwise, when you get home, you have to wind this by hand if you don't have this set up at home, and into a ball, which is really fine, but if you leave the store, wind it up at the store before you leave, it does go a lot faster that way. So I'm going to show you how to use these things so when you're in the yarn store you know what you're doing. First up, I have a hank of yarn here. I'm going to remove the label and untwist the hank, which is just a matter of popping one end out of the ring. And you're left with a big ring of yarn like this. You put this on the umbrella swift, and I have a plastic and metal one here. Wood or plastic or metal, they're all about the same. You want to expand it like an umbrella so that the yarn is taut around the whole thing. And then you'll look for a little knot tied in the end. Sometimes it's multiple knots, sometimes it's just one. I'm going to cut out this knot, and I'm left with some waste yarn to pull out. In this case, the waste yarn is different from the real yarn on the Swift. And as I go around, I see that I have some more waste yarn. This yarn manufacturer was very careful by tying multiple bits of waste yarn around this hank to make sure nothing got tangled. Wow, this is a lot of waste yarn. Okay, and then when I look at this, I have one strand of yarn that's kind of coming around from the outside. This other end is kind of on the inside, so I'm going to leave that one. I'm going to pull from the one that's on the outside. We have our end, and we're taking it over to thread it on the ball winder. Now the ball winder has this little thing right here, and the yarn needs to actually be thread through this to get wound. And to do that, we start with it holding it back like this, pulling it forward and forward again. People who use sewing machines are usually really good at this part. You can just take it and thread it through like, whoops, and thread it through like that if you like, or it's just a quick wrap around like that. Then we have this slit across the top of the ball winder here. You want to set your yarn across that like so that it's caught in the two notches there, and then you can start winding. And while you're doing this, I'm going to stop for a moment so the sound isn't so loud. While you're doing this, if your winder, if the Swift is really loose and free spinning, you probably want to apply a little tension to the yarn like this with your fingers, which is what I'm doing here because this Swift does spin very, very freely. If it's a wood Swift, there's a chance that it's not going to spin as freely. You probably don't need to put tension on the yarn. It will only make the ball of yarn that you're winding really tight. So then while you're doing this, while you're spinning this, if for some reason you need to stop, like you're going to sneeze or something, and you need to stop spinning for a moment, reach your hand over and stop this. Because if you don't, if you wind and wind and wind, and then you stop, this thing will keep going and it'll end up wrapping around the whole thing the wrong way. We want to make you look slick at the yarn store. You want to look like you know what you're doing. Anyway, so you're going to keep winding until this thing is empty. And we can speed through this process because there's one last thing I want to show you at the end of this. Okay, we're coming to the end now. And yay, we're at the end. We can get the Swift out of the way here. We're done with that. And I'm left with this cake of yarn. And we can go in for a shot here. This bit that we put in the notches, this bit of yarn is still there. When we pick this up, we want to hang on to this bit. I'm going to pull it up from the bottom and hold on to this strand of yarn in my pincher fingers so that I don't lose it in there, because that is the center pull. Then the last thing I do is I unwind a couple of feet of yarn and wind it around the outside. This is the other end, and tuck it in, and then that end won't bother me until I get to it, the very end of the yarn, and I have a nice center pull cake. There, now you should look like a pro when you're at the yarn store winding your yarn.